first met Rick when I was invited to come as a guest to the Breakfast Club when they were meeting at the press club. And Rick was one of the first people I met. However, I had a number of clients that were already members of the Breakfast Club. And that was the reason why I was there. It took 3 years for me to get into the club because at that time we had specific business designations. But Rick and I became close, fast friends during that first meeting. And since then, we have enjoyed many, many wonderful times together. He was also a member of the 50th anniversary committee for the Golden Gate Breakfast Club when I was president. From that, because we had so many organizational meetings, we decided that we wanted to continue to meet outside of the club. And that's when the BNO was started. And I'll let Rick tell you what BNO is and what that all means to the club and to him. Take it away, Rick Wilson.
Thank you, Reginald. Originally, I was going to speak about how I got into business. However, after writing this piece about 10 of the most interesting members of this club that I have been a member of since 1985, I decided to send a love letter to the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. Given the time allotted, I have picked 7 of the 10 to talk about this morning, starting with Bob Cudine. When I first met Bob and his lovely wife, Julia Cudine, Bob was the general manager of KBHK Channel 44 with TV studios located in the city. I was immediately drawn to Bob, not just because he is fun-loving and engaging, but he also understood television better than anybody I know. Janet Gay and I lived together in Sausalito's Hurricane Gulch for 3 years, starting in 1977. Janet went on to marry Mike Freed, a lawyer and developer whose numerous successful projects, not least of which include the Post Ranch Inn and Big Sur, excuse me. Mike also built a handful of attractive homes in the lower south side of Hurricane Gulch in Sausalito. One of the new homes next to Mike and Janet's came on the market and had many suitors, including Bob's wife, Julia, a lovely Southern belle from Little Rock. She said to me, "Ricky, if you help me get this house, I will be forever in your debt." As I enjoyed the Cudine's company and would welcome 2 more friendly faces to the neighborhood, I called up Mike, apologized for sticking my nose into his business, and told him that, you know, these are the kind of people he wanted to have living next door to them. So Julia got her house with its stunning views, and I remember a number of pleasant evenings pondering the view over a card table. Bob had never really played Hollywood-style gin, but he's a fast learner, and while I won in the beginning, he got better and better, and you can guess the rest. When Johnny Carson announced his retirement from The Tonight Show, I called Julia and asked her to repay the house debt by getting me 2 tickets to the show's taping in lovely downtown Burbank. Julia said that she just might be able to help out. I had been to a taping of the Dick Cavett Show in the Big Apple when I was in college, but to see in person the master of the television universe rated high on my bucket list. Julia came through like a champ and got me 8 VIP tickets. We flew from Sacramento to Burbank, rented a car, had lunch, and went to the studio about a half hour before showtime at 6 p.m. We marched by the long line of other audience members and were seated 3 rows back from Doc Severinsen leading the NBC orchestra. Oh my God, what a show Johnny and company put on that afternoon. The absolute highlight was Karnak the Magnificent made his final appearance in this relatively small studio. Karnak killed, Ed laughed, and Doc wailed during the commercials. Ed wasn't the only guy in fits of laughter. After the show, we drove back to the airport, flew to Sac, drove up the Cape Valley, the big town of Rumsey, and got home in time to take the show at 11:30. I still have the tape, and yes, you can always pick Ricky out of a crowd. In addition to Boys' Night Out, which Reginald mentioned earlier, members of the Breakfast Club would assemble at Bardelli's on O'Farrell Street regularly for lunch. The place is gone now, but in addition to my favorite fried filet of sole, crispy string fries, and sauteed spinach, preceded by a delicious Roquefort salad, lunch was very reasonable price-wise. Occasionally, we would repair to the bar after lunch for an after-lunch toddy, and here comes the scene. We were probably in a group of 5 or so, but the 2 main characters in this story were Bob and Eddie the Killer Snow, who also hailed from the same part of the country as Julia. I had turned towards Bob at the bar, and all of a sudden behind me, I hear a cowboy whoop and holler. Eddie may have been slightly overserved at lunch. Bob and I both turned our attention to Eddie as he cried out loudly while hovering above his bar stool, "Now you know why I don't drink." I turned back to Bob in disbelief, but Bob was already headed out the door. If you recall, Bardelli's front door was in an alcove surrounded by beautiful stained glass. Not long after Bob moved to New Jersey, Bob moved to New Jersey and took over WWOR TV at 9 Broadcast Plaza in Secaucus. I visited them there, and again, they had a lovely view, only this time it was Manhattan across the water. WWOR had a strong regional talk comedy show starring Richard Bay. I have a VHS tape of the show, and the label says Richard Bay 220 Secret Proposals. It was a fun afternoon. As we were perched in the front row, the camera caught Bob, Julia, and me during a pan or two. Bob gave me a tape with the note dated November 10th, 1993 that said, "Dear Rick, knowing that no one would believe anybody who put you on television, both Julia and I felt you needed proof. We were able to get the frames off the cutting room floor and had them piece together your visage for future generations." Bob and Julia gave up the TV business and moved to Florida, and I looked them up once down there. They were happily retired, and Julia finally got Bob on a big buck diet. He had lost 40 or 50 pounds and looked like $1 million. Ray Scioto, a treasure with a heart. Ever since I was a member of the Breakfast Club, Ray Scioto was our treasurer. Not just a treasurer, but a treasurer with a heart. He used to introduce himself after he closed S&C Ford. Located at 2001 Market Street, the dealership was roundly known as the home of the miracle deal. Sadly, after a battle with cancer, Ray passed away recently. There was a massive presence of current and former members in attendance at his funeral. Mike Hanlon shared the following story. Mike had played Santa at our Breakfast Club holiday party for as long as I can remember. Reg and I play Santa's elves. One Christmas, as Santa was entering the Commandant's ballroom to hand out candy canes and to distribute charitable checks to organizations supported by our members, Ray gave him a friendly pat on the back. As Santa worked the room, he didn't immediately understand why members and guests started snickering when they saw Santa's back. Ray had attached a bumper sticker to his coat that said, "I love my S&C Ford." When I moved to Sebastopol 13 years ago, my Wednesday morning commute to the club suffered from a massive slowdown while navigating the Nevado Narrows on Highway 101. If I left home before 5:15 a.m., it was smooth sailing to the Golden Gate Bridge. If I left after 5:15, it would add at least an additional hour and a half or a half hour to my commute. The point is, I was among the earliest arrivals, and so was Ray, who collected the price of breakfast from the members. Early on in my club tenure, there were several members who functioned as a greeter. I became that greeter in later years, and Ray and I would share stories at the greeting table. Ray was a wonderful storyteller, and here comes 2 of my all-time favorite Ray Scioto stories. You do need to know that Ray started his career as a bartender in a dive on Van Ness. Went to work as a Ford salesman and became the owner of S&C Ford. Ray sold more Fords in Northern California than anyone. He and Marie Brooks of Ellis Brooks Chevrolet were the last 2 dealerships selling domestic cars in the city. Now you have to cross a bridge or drive down to the peninsula to buy a new car made in this country. When Ray was a teenager, he wanted a 409. As in the Beach Boys song, "She's real fine, my 409. For the unwashed, a 409 is a Chevy with a big block engine. So a Ford guy started with a Chevy, go figure. Back in the day, there was Gateway Chevrolet in the East Bay, operated by a slick guy named Jim Westman. Jim advertised his Chevys during the late night movies. His shtick was that he sat up on a stepladder in his showroom while pitching cars. Ray's father, who was the executive chef at the Cliff House for many years, accompanied his son on their visit to Gateway Chevrolet. As was typical at a lot of dealerships, the sales manager had each of the sales cubicles wired so he could listen in on his guys' pitches. When Ray made a weak attempt to negotiate a better deal, the sales manager sent another salesman to Ray's cubicle who said, excuse me, Joe, but there's another customer who's interested in the excuse me, in the 409. Is this young man serious? Ray, of course, immediately said, I'll take it. During the entire dance, Ray's pop said absolutely nothing. But after money changed hands and they were outside on the parking lot, father cuffed son on the back of the head and said, you had to be a big shot. I guess everybody has to start somewhere, but I have always thought it ironic that the master salesman got hustled when he was a kid. The other favorite story that Ray shared with me not long before the club went on a COVID sabbatical and entered the world of Zoom. Early one Wednesday morning, he asked me if I wanted to hear about his trip to the Marines Memorial Club that morning. Of course I did. Well, I was driving the Maserati, and I have to admit that I was, shall we say, exceeding the speed limit. One of San Francisco's finest lit me up and pulled me over. The first words out of the cop's mouth were, nice car, pal. Too bad you had to open it up on my watch. Excuse me. Ray had a retired sergeant that everybody revered and respected on speed dial, and he got him on the line. I said to the cop, I've got Sergeant so-and-so on the line here. He says he's your friend and would like to say hello. He handed the phone to the cop, who listened for about 30 seconds, hands the phone back and says, have a nice day, sir. I think these two stories are the perfect bookends of an extraordinary life. Ray was a native son and lived his entire life in everybody's favorite city. He knew everybody that was anybody, and they all knew Ray. Good evening, Mr. Scioto. I have your usual table. Please come in. Two of Ray's favorite projects were Fleet Week and the Salesian Boys and Girls Club, where he was a saint. I was honored by his lovely wife, Lisa, excuse me, who asked me to speak at his celebration of life at the City Club. It was an emotional talk because Ray was one of my favorite folks. While the day was a sad one, I did reconnect with Randy DiMartini, who runs the Salesian Boys and Girls Club. Randy and I share a love for Elvis Presley. He is much more serious about Elvis than anybody I know. So much so that he appeared as Elvis in a Reno show with costume changes while being backed up by an excellent band. Randy sent me a file of the entire show, and he killed as the king. My hometown is well known for its distinctive characters, and Ray and Randy are right up there with Emperor Norton and Herb Caen, with whom I share a birthday. Dick Poley. Dick was a Navy man through and through. He was, I believe, recently retired when I first met him. His final posting was commander of Treasure Island. My father was also a Navy man, and I remember one afternoon, he took me to lunch at the Officers Club on TI. As we were being greeted at the podium, the GM snapped back, offered a crisp salute, and said, welcome, boss. Admiral Chester Nimitz was behind us, but he got his usual table immediately. I only encountered the Admiral in passing, but he had a distinct, commanding presence. Dick was the heart and soul of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. Almost until he passed away from lung cancer, he wrote the members' notes for the weekly bulletin. If there are 100 members and each has something interesting to say, being the scribe for this organization takes a serious time commitment. Just ask Pete Ratto. If Dick had something on his mind that involved the welfare of the club, he would address us as breakfast clubbers in a tone that indeed commanded and got attention. It wasn't quite now hear this, which is how the commanding officer starts his address to his sailors over the ship's PA, but it was message sent, message received. Probably Dick's best friend in the club was Gene DiMartini, who was a proud member of Sunset Scavengers and made movies as a hobby. Gene's Diary of a Garbage Man is a short classic flick. The most memorable part of the film is the ending. After Gene parks his garbage truck, he gets into his T-Bird and drives off into the sunset. Dick and Gene had a comedy routine entitled Broccoli and Zucchini. Gene would speak in Italian and Dick would translate in English. The funniest part of the bit was when Dick would ask a question which would launch Gene into a lengthy, full-on Italian diatribe. Dick would pause, smile, and translate. He say no. The person who started the club in 1946 was Frank Beck. Frank was fond of skilled oratory and designed the meeting so all members would introduce themselves, so our guests know who we are. Then each member might tell a joke or share a funny glimpse of himself. Dick loved bocce ball, and he shared that love with me at our annual bocce tournament. It is the only game that I know where a 90-plus-year-old man can stumble onto a court with his walker, get handed the ball, and kick your young ass. If memory serves, the club's tournament is named for Dick Poley. Dick fought cancer for years and never complained. Actually, never told anybody that he was in the fight of his life. The way I remember his passing was that on a Wednesday morning, it was announced that Dick was home on hospice in Mill Valley. Several of us, including Roy Wonder and Kathy Cherit, the club's first female president, drove to his house after the meeting to say our goodbyes. Dick was installed in a hospital bed in his living room, surrounded by all his medals and accolades. The man was staring death straight in the face, but remained positive, almost cheerful on that Wednesday morning. He died the following weekend. Dick Poley, a fine gent, if there ever was one. I think of him all the time. Jerry Stratford, and I can't tell you, Jerry, how glad I am to see your smiling face this morning. When I joined the Breakfast Club in 1985, Jerry Stratford was our president. I was sponsored by Ivan Saul Cutler, who was vice president of the Western Merchandise Mart, while I was general manager of the trade show division. The Mart is now known as the Twitter Building, and Elon may or may not buy it, but I can't believe that you get naming rights in a 12-story building by only taking 3 floors. But anyway, that's the new age. It used to be that the club was limited to 100 men, and I had to wait 6 or 8 months after I was deemed acceptable for a member to pass away. Today, it seems hard to believe, but there used to be a waiting list to get in, just like Reginald mentioned, his 3 years. I believe I first met Jerry when, for lack of a better term, I was rushing the Breakfast Club so that they could see what I fit in. The first meeting I attended was an offsite aboard the USS Carl Vinson, an aircraft carrier stationed in Alameda. The person I remember best from that day was Grant Huntley, who owned a multi-generational family hardware store in the city. Grant walked up to me, stuck out his hand, and we chatted very comfortably because we both grew up in San Mateo Park. While looking over the island of Alameda from the deck of this behemoth, you never forget the first person who speaks to you in any new world. Grant died of cancer 5 or 6 years back. Strangely enough, there was no word of his passing from his family and no obituary in the Chronicle. As I got to know President Jerry, I was delighted to learn that he was also an undergraduate student at the University of Virginia. We were only 2 of 10,000 students, and we overlapped by 2 years. We never crossed paths in Charlottesville, even though our frat houses were just across the Madison Bowl from each other. Yes, that is James Madison, one of Mr. Jefferson's closest allies. A similar scenario manifested itself when I moved to Sebastopol and joined the Rotary Club. At the time, the Rotary president also graduated from the Webb School of California in Claremont. Richard Power was a class of 62 at Webb, and I was a class of 68, so our paths never crossed in the boarding school. I've always viewed this coincidence as an interesting omen that Rotary would work for me. Jerry is one of the most creative people I have ever met, and a thoroughly nice person. Wahoo wah. He had a design company high on the peninsula. He is also an avid sports and outdoors man. Golf and skiing are among his passions. We bonded one day in the late 80s before computers were ubiquitous when he posed a very interesting question to me. He said, Rick, there are two kinds of companies, the ones that have a website and the ones that won't be around. What type is Cache Canyon River Trips? Now that was a come to Jesus moment. For $2,000, Jerry designed our website. It had all kinds of interesting bells and whistles, including a rendering of yours truly contemplating my reflection in the shimmering water. Well, most of our business came via word of mouth or repeat guests. About a third of the business, as in new business, came from that site. I could always tell when it was up on the screen by the questions they asked. The website kept the doors open and the lights on. Thank you, Jerry. He also designed a couple of really cool t-shirts for the company. My favorite was the Natural Geographic, a beautiful knockoff of the National Geographic magazine cover. The front of the shirt looked like the magazine's cover, but actually was a map of the river with the table of contents that showed the names of the more interesting rapids, such as Mother and Oh Shit. This experience taught me that the iconic magazine takes its intellectual property very seriously, something along the lines of two of my favorite words, cease and desist. It is a pity for two reasons. First, the publisher has no sense of humor. And second, this shirt was one of my all-time bestsellers. I remember clearly one meeting after Jerry was no longer president and we sat next to each other at breakfast. During introductions, a fine gent stood and gave the identical intro he gave every week. Red Star, Morris and Grelnick Associates, down from up north. Red lived in Marin. Jerry turned to me as Red finished and said, Rick, that's why I never repeat the same greeting. That was my second Stratford come to Jesus moment. I took a page from Jerry's book, and to this day, I endeavor to have something new to say when introducing myself. This is the one constant component in my intro. Red is now long, there is one. Red is now long gone, but to honor him, I always say down from up north if we were in person, or still up north if we were on Zoom. I was lucky enough to be one of a small group of guests when Jerry hosted his retirement party from Stratford Design Associates at the Olympic Club's golf course clubhouse. Of all the other pals Jerry assembled, I was the only breakfast club. They all spoke of Jerry's prowess on the slopes and the greens, but I spoke about the website because that's why my company was still around. When the club met in person at the Marines Memorial Club, I attended the meetings unless I had a midweek 2-day trip or was out of town. One Wednesday, Jerry made his final appearance at breakfast and I was absent. And I'm sorry I missed that meeting, but I'm delighted you're here today. Jerry has disappeared into what I hope is a joyful retirement. I think he can still shoot his age on the links. Jerry Stratford, thank you for helping my business stay around, at least for the 23 years that I owned it. Reginald Young. I have made many wonderful friends at the Breakfast Club, and my two closest are Mike Hanlon and Reginald Young. Reg is originally from Kansas City, but I can't hold that against him, even if I'm not a big fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. He now lives with his lovely wife, Estella, in Pacific. Reg was president of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club during its 50th anniversary year. Of course, we had a gala celebration of this milestone at what was then called the A&A Hotel south of the slot, as locals referred to SOMA, south of Market area. Michael Pritchard, Glenn Godbold, and I set up what was a lovely party. We had almost all the 100 members in attendance, excuse me, with their wives or significant others, and most stayed at the hotel. Since I had some experience in the convention management business, I was able to get the hotel to comp the over-the-top presidential suite for the Young family. After the party was over downstairs, some of us repaired to the penthouse suite, which was crowned with a grand piano. Reg and Estella's two youngest daughters, Erin and Christina, not even yet teens, entertained us with a melodic piano duo while we had a nightcap. The night proved to be Reg's and my bonding moment. The Honorable Michael, Reginald, and I were the nucleus of a long-standing tradition known as the BNO, or Boys Night Out. Other regulars in this group included Alex King, retired from San Francisco Fire Department, John Kithis, my lawyer and very close friend, and on occasion, Mark Schustoff, who is Judge Hanlon's lawyer. I will never forget Mike saying to me one night, "I decided if you can bring your attorney on these outings, then so can I." That was funny because the Honorable Daniel Michael Patrick is retired from the Court of Appeal in the city. Michael is 12 years older than me and has always been the older brother I never had in my immediate family. Mike is the subject of the final chapter of this piece. These big fun evenings were always what I refer to as 3-alarm dinners. That means 3 venues. First, a pre-prandial stop at a bar for cocktails, then a fine dining establishment, and finally a post-prandial at a nightclub, always with live music. Somehow, I was able to get my BNO pals to accompany me on talent hunt excursions to find bands for my Rumsey Blues Fest. It was on such occasions that I found some of my biggest stars, including excuse me, Tommy Castro, Johnny Nitro, Sam Marshall, Red Archibald, and Daniel Castro. I can't remember who said it first, probably Mike. What happens in North Beach stays in North Beach. Reginald is also into jazz as well as the blues. He teamed up with a talented piano player named Dee Snyder to MC open mic evenings at Rosala's nightclub on Fillmore Street. He developed a new persona for the gig, namely the Wicked Wizard. I have witnessed this in person, and the Wick Wiz never found a microphone that didn't love him. His Wicked Wizard and my chef Rickey are, shall we say, elevated personalities that we each developed for some of our finest moments. Reg and Estella have 2 timeshares in Puerto Vallarta, the newer one of which is a lovely beachside resort known as Garza Blanca, about 20 miles south of PV. I have visited Garza Blanca, had a tour and a delightful brunch with the owner, Reg. I was scheduled for a serious visit about 2 years ago, but COVID vanished that concept. One trip before that, we did get a chance to spend some time with the Youngs in PV. Our most lavish dinner was on that trip was at the Café des Artistes, which has to be the premier dining destination and my favorite in Puerto Vallarta. It is located in a hillside sculpture garden where you dine on your own terrace. We enjoyed delicious food, excellent mariachi music, and great company. I can hardly wait to get back to Garza Blanca and the Café des Artistes. I had been working on this piece for a couple of days when my computer went into total freak out stress mode. The freaking thing actually started yelling at me. I had been hacked big time, and while I came close to falling for the scam, but luckily I came to my senses before I dispatched $548 American money to these Indians. I can tell you with impunity, we're talking dots, not feathers. The hack caused me to give my old pal Reg, the founder of Orca Computer Solutions, a call. He kindly talked me through my near miss and put my mind at ease. Well, almost at ease. These hackers had total control over my computer and the information and all that information, and that scares me big time. Hopefully, these jerks are off all over the next sucker and will leave me alone going forward. Michael Pritchard. Other than Ivan Cutler, who sponsored me, all of the good folks I have met as a member of the Breakfast Club, Mike Pritchard is the only other one whom I knew before he joined the club. I met Mike in 1983 when I was working with the Vietnam Veterans Project, a job that was funded by a Bill Graham benefit concert starring the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Starship, and Country Joe McDonald. The concert, the first ever held at Moscone Center, made a profit of $116,000. Paul Kantner, both of the airplane and the Starship, said that while half the proceeds could be used for the immediate needs in the veterans community, such as paying the rent at the vet center in the mission and to keep the suicide line in operation, but he said he wanted half the money kept aside to reach a larger audience. We reached that audience by fabricating the first photographic reproduction of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. The concept is, or was, if Muhammad doesn't go to the mountain, you bring the mountain to Muhammad. This turned out to be a half-scale traveling and healing exhibit. We also had musical acts, including the Iron Butterfly, Inagata Davida, was the song of the war for most vets, the Chambers brothers, Gil Scott Heron, and Jesse Colin Young. We also recruited well-known comedians to introduce the acts at the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium. And yes, Michael is a very funny guy, as Steve Martin would say. When I first met Mike, he opened his comedy act by chugging a pitcher of beer. He is now around 40 years sober. Besides comedy, Mike is also a Vietnam vet, social worker who specializes in talking to school student bodies where some tragedy has occurred, such as a mass shooting. He also did the voices of all the various critters in the Star Wars movies. The comedy community is tightly knit in the Bay Area, and Michael was Robin Williams' best friend. Robin referred to Mike as Saint Michael. Mike is also a Rotarian, Paul Harris Fellow twice, and was kind enough to speak to the students at Esparto High School when my daughter was a senior and I was president of the school board. He also spoke to my Rotary Club when I was president in 2016. He is a big man, with a huge presence. You can pick his laugh out of any crowd. I once asked him why he laughed so heartily at any joke he was told, even the clunker. He gave me a hangdog, unsmiling look and said, "Ricky, how would you feel if you told me a joke and I responded like this?" Michael had a heart attack about 7 years ago or so, and that put him on a big buck diet. Since then, he has been known to say, "If you see me walking down the street with my lovely wife, Mary Jo, you should comment on how much weight I've lost." The guy that put me together with both Mike and the veterans community was Jack McCloskey, who hung out at the Paul Mall, a fabulous dive bar on Haight Street. Jack was a medic in Vietnam, had a heart of gold, was a kingpin in the veterans community, and enjoyed his cocktails. When Jack passed away, I went to his funeral and Mike spoke. Mike is perfect in that role, funny, poignant, and respectful all at the same time. As I was listening to him eulogize our good friend Jack, I said to myself, "Ricky, you could do this as well." I had never spoken at a funeral at that point and didn't have the courage to walk up to the podium. I'm glad to report that I've gotten over my fear of public speaking and by now have lost count of how many funeral orations I have made. Sadly, other than funerals, I usually only get to see the big man at the Breakfast Club and holiday party. With the 2-year interruption of COVID, it has been harder to keep in touch with what happened when, but a couple of years back, as we bid each other adieu at the Christmas breakfast, he said, "Ricky, know that if I never see you again, I love you, man." Michael, we share the same sentiment. Believe me, the Michael Pritchards of the world don't come by often. You were right, big man, when you said laughter is always the best medicine. As the funniest guy I know has said, it must be time to go because I'm up here sweating like Lindsay Lohan at a DUI checkpoint. And last but not least, the Honorable Daniel Michael Patrick Hanlon. I think I'm right on time here. The Honorable Daniel Michael Patrick Hanlon joined the Breakfast Club in 1975 and had already been through the chairs before I met him upon joining the club 10 years after. After law school, Mike had a tour of duty in the Marines way down yonder in Vietnam. After returning home, luckily in one piece, he became a Superior Court judge and then graduated to the Appellate Court. Judge Hanlon was also on the Judicial Commission. I think of 3 members that would decide the appropriate admonishments or punishments for statewide colleagues on the bench who did something inappropriate or illegal. Simply stated, I have heard several in the know describe Michael as a judge's judge. I first got to know Mike when he asked me to help throw a Valentine's party for this club, its members and its wives. It was a big fun gathering, and one of the things I remember best is how loudly the club members moaned when we raised the price of admission from $25 to $30, which included booze, dinner, and live entertainment. Early on in my time as a member, there was another judge named Ira Brown, who was known as Bill. Judge Brown and I both enjoyed lunch at the Hay Street Grill. One day I sat across the room. I saw him across the room, approached and asked him if he was planning to attend the Valentine's Day dinner. Bill was a big man. He was sitting and I was standing and we were damn near eye to eye. He piped up in his booming stentorial tone, That would be odd. When I reported this conversation to Michael, he laughed and said, Ricky, Bill is gay. I didn't see that one coming. I have to share my absolute favorite story about an adventure of Bill and Mike. For years, they competed in a charity cook-off. They always entered a culinary delight, and they usually won. They usually won, that is, until the year Willie McCovey and a toothy blonde, and that's exactly how she was first explained to me, entered the fray with a bowl of cut-up fruit drizzled with an after-dinner adult beverage. Bill and Mike had constructed the most elaborate cake ever that was a piece of art with many layers. And the winner is Willie McCovey and his fair-haired friend. After the announcement, Bill was heard throughout the room to say in booming stentorial whisper, and I apologize for my French, but this is a direct quote, "Mike, am I led to believe that we have been beaten by a fucking fruit cocktail?" I hadn't been a member for more than a year or two when Mike suggested he would like to organize a 2-day weekend rafting trip, mostly for club members, but also for his colleagues and clerks. At one time or another, about half the club members enjoyed some fun in the sun over a 20-year period. I do remember one interesting camp scene. Mike was leading his group back to the kitchen and campfire area, and there were probably 50 happy campers hanging around. Mike is also capable of an Ira-like stentorial tone, and he said, "I smell a misdemeanor." Center camp cleared almost immediately. On our boys' night out adventures, we had some great meals, not least of which was at A16 in the marina, where Mike's grandson is or was the chef. The finest moment was when we celebrated Mike's 80th birthday party 4 years ago at the house, maybe 5 years ago, at the House of Prime Rib. Joe Betts, the owner, was a member of the Breakfast Club for many years. When we asked Joe if we could celebrate the honorable birthday party in his restaurant, he kindly said that we could do it in his brand new wine cellar, which is about as tall as the cotton gets at one of the city's finest dining establishments. I'm almost done. If you are facing the bar, the cellar is to the right. We were a party of 5, and all the denizens at the bar were envious. Joe, as always, thank you for your kind hospitality. Speaking of Joe Betts, here's another Hanlon story that must be told. Joe had a Rolls Royce, and Mike asked to borrow it to drive his daughter, Kathy, on the occasion of her wedding. After all the ceremonies, the Rolls was parked at the Sutter Stockton garage for the night. The next morning, in the sober light of dawn, the mother of the bride, Yvonne, drove Mike back to the garage to retrieve the Rolls. When they got to the space in which this jewel was parked, it was gone. Mike then walked all the floors of the garage with Yvonne following in the car, and that expensive piece of machinery was not to be found. The car was ultimately located disabled along I-280 South. When I first asked Joe about the damage, he said the Rolls had a system where when the car is hot wired, it disables itself automatically 10 miles down the road. When I asked Joe the same question, maybe 5 years later, he told me he had to replace the engine. Apparently, when you hotwire Rolls, it will not shift above second gear. Over almost 40 years I have known the judge, I have sought his advice on who I should retain as a lawyer on 2 occasions. He recommended my divorce lawyer and gave me the name of an excellent attorney when my younger brother needed help in the North Bay. Thank you, Uncle Michael. Michael married the love of his life, Yvonne, just after he finished Marine boot camp, right before he deployed overseas. To this day, they are a wonderful couple. At one of the last boot camp fallouts, Mike requested an audience with the drill sergeant. Candidate Hanlon has a question, drill sergeant. What is on your alleged mind? Candidate Hanlon requests to forego the last haircut. Candidate Hanlon, why would you not want to look your best at graduation? Candidate Hanlon is getting married right after graduation. I don't want to look like a bowling ball. This may have humored the Sarge, but the answer was no. Yvonne is known by Mike as she who must be obeyed. Here's my all-time favorite Yvonne story. Mike was driving downtown near the Hall of Justice. Yvonne was riding shotgun, and Mike made a right turn on a red light without coming to a full stop. A CHP officer saw this transgression, lit Mike up, and pulled him over. You have to know that the CHP provides security for the bench. The officer walks up to the car and says, "Hello, Judge. We need to chat for about a few minutes because who knows who's looking out the window at the hall." After a brief but pleasant chat, the officer turns to depart, and Yvonne says, "You mean you're not going to give him a ticket?" Mike's punchline was, "It was awfully quiet in the car on the ride home." Maybe a dozen or so years back, the Hanlons moved from Wawona Street in the Sunset District to Santa Rosa to be closer to Yvonne's aging parents. By this time, another Breakfast Club veteran, Dave Crockett, had invited me to be a member of the Kenwood Yacht Club. I invited Mike to join us for a couple of occasions at our monthly luncheons. All of the members enjoyed meeting the Honorable Hanlon, and now he is a member as well. Now I get to see him at least once a month, hopefully including this Thursday in Kenwood. Michael has been a wonderful addition in my life, a great friend, and as I mentioned earlier, the older brother I never had. In my 37 years as a member of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club, I made some of the best friends in that club. When I moved to the big town of Rumsey in 1986, I quit all my other club activities except the Breakfast Club. I could be a happy boy for 6 out of 7 days a week, but I needed to go back to the city once a week to hear the foghorns and smell the concrete. I suppose I always knew in the back of my mind I would return to the Bay Area. And that's my story, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your kind attention.
Rickey, that was wonderful. You didn't let us down. We always love your stories. And who would like to ask the first question of Rickey? You can unmute and ask him.
Rick, I have to ask you, have you stayed in touch with Ivan? You mentioned him a couple of times, and I see emails and stuff from him all the time, and he's on Facebook pretty accurately, but
Jerry, the answer is no, I haven't. He moved, remember the Western Merchandise Mart was a furniture mart, and he was a vice president there, and he got a job somehow in the furniture business somewhere in North Carolina.
Exactly.
I did attend their wedding, and he was a great friend, but he just disappeared, and I don't do Facebook or any of that kind of stuff.
I'll have to send you his contact information.
I would appreciate that. I would love to reach out to he and Wendy and see how they're doing.
All right, wonderful. Craig, can I put you in charge of handling all the Q&A? Because I have to get ready for a minute in another meeting in just a few minutes.
I would be delighted to. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
I see a couple hands up. So we have Pete Ratto with a question and then Bert Hill. Pete, why don't you go first?
Thank you, Craig. Rickey, this was a great presentation. You bring up a lot of old memories, and it was excellent, except for one thing. You referred to Gene DiMartini as a partner in Sunset Scavenger Company.
Uh-oh.
Gene was a partner in Scavengers Protective Association. So Gene is rolling in his grave to have said that he would be from Sunset Scavenger. So just a correction.
I apologize. And you remember you were there when he gave his talk about the history of garbage collection in San Francisco. And apparently back in the day, they were all armed and they fought over who picked up whose garbage.
Yeah, exactly.
Gene was a wonderful guy. And it's been way too long since we've shown the movie Diary of a Garbage Man for the club. But when we get back in person, or maybe even on Zoom, one of these days, that needs to be reshown.
Yeah, I was talking to Rob DiMartini, and we had actually talked about that. So I'm going to try to get that disc, and we can play it one day. There are two of them. The longest one, G, is about a day in the life of a garbage man. Who was
right. That may be the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, you're thinking of G, but that also includes the second film, which was Toreador. Where Gene acts as a bullfighter and has a German Shepherd running back and forth up the tradesman entrance. That's the film that actually won an award at Cannes. So, yeah. Wow. So, anyhow, thanks for the great memories, Rickey.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, Bert,
yeah.
you're up next.
Yes, Dick Poley. I knew Dick Poley in the 1980s and 90s before I joined the Breakfast Club. From a whole different standpoint, I don't know if you know, but Dick Poley was really a senior person in the Boy Scouts.
I do know
aware of
that.
Yeah, and we wound up in 1990 on the United Way Boy Scout Task Force, which was deciding what to do about LGBT scouts and scoutmasters in the Bay Area. And needless to say, Dick and I were on kind of opposite sides, even though we were on the same committee.
I just can't imagine, Bert.
Yeah, and Dick, of course, never hid anything that he was thinking about. So we, as the time went on, we actually got to a form of mutual respect and ended up coming back with a proposal. The Boy Scouts rejected it and said, no, but hell no. We're going to do a 5-year plan, and the result, the community would just would accept the fact that we're working on it, but nobody else would take it. But then I was shocked. That was in 1990. I sort of lost a little bit of track. I saw him occasionally at Boy Scout outings and stuff like that. But then I joined the Breakfast Club, and I'll be damned, there was Dick. So it was really a great getting together again, and he's an exceptional guy, and I really miss him.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bert. Thank you.
Hey, Rick, Mike Milstein, I would concur with that regarding Dick Poley. He was a longtime Kiwanian, and he was actually my sponsor in the Breakfast Club. And when he was in charge of Treasure Island, he would invite a group of tennis players. We'd go over there, play tennis, have lunch at the Officers Club, which was very pleasurable. And I'll always remember my golf days with Dick when he was a member of the Presidio Golf Club. And it absolutely broke his heart once the military lost the privilege to play at the Presidio, but just a great guy.
You are so correct. He was, as I said, he was the heart and soul of this club. But as far as I'm concerned, still is.
Yeah.
We have a question from the Pitch Freak.
Antonio,
Rickey,
good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. You did not let us down. It was incredible. I just want to say how much I love the stories. I do want to know, there is a story, a famous story on the river that I thought you might mention, where somebody in the club may have had an accident falling off one of the actual watercrafts that you were engaged with here. Do you recall that story?
No, we don't need to go into that one.
Well, actually, Reginald, I was not going to mention your name because there are were two members, sadly both passed, of the Breakfast Club that no matter how many times I gave them the orientation, they didn't get it. And they were Eddie Snow and Roy Wonder. And I would always threaten that I was going to invent a Velcro bathing suit so that they could stay in the craft. But I never got around to it. But I can see Roy and Eddie, slipping over the side like it was yesterday.
Rickey, thanks
Rick.
a lot. Wonderful memories, warm greeting. Thank you very much for your trip too. It was great.
Michael, and I can't tell you that I went up to see unfortunately a friend who was put on hospice recently, and I drove down the valley, and lo and behold, they have rebuilt Low Water Bridge. I
No,
almost
Really?
crashed when I saw it. So maybe there will be another opportunity in this world to have that lovely wilderness run that
yeah, that'd be
you enjoy
great.
so much.
Take care. I've got to run.
Well, I see you on Thursday.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thanks, Mike.
Happens to be tomorrow.
That will be tomorrow. Absolutely correct.
Rick, just to clarify one thing, Garza Blanca isn't our timeshare. Garza Blanca is a property we actually own.
You are correct, and I've forgotten that. You have one up in Nuevo,
In the marina.
I believe.
In the
And-
marina, we have 2 timeshares,
There you go.
but Garza Blanca is an investment property. We actually own that.
Well, you're a Mexican real estate tycoon, as far as I can tell.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we're just about done. Thank you all for your time and attention this morning.
Great show, Rick.
Signing off. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Great job.
Beautiful job, Rick. Thank you, Rick.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Love you,
Thank you.
brother. Love you. Love you.
Excellent, excellent job.
Well done. Such history.
Thank you.
Thank you.